Hello, my name is Alissa Bevan, and today I will be talking about the summer recreational trail influence on ungulates in the Gunnison Basin of Colorado. My focus is on the effects of recreation on ungulates' behavior. In keeping with my panel's theme, I would like to share a quote from Aldo Leopold's 1933 Game Management. The hope of the future lies not in curbing the influence of human occupancy, but in creating a better understanding of the extent of that influence and a new ethic for its governance. We just heard from Chloe on study design and camera methods. Before I get further into my presentation, I will quickly recap a few important details. I will then jump into talking about what we did to classify pictures and how recreation was analyzed. After that, I'll talk about wildlife behaviors and share some of my preliminary results. As a quick reminder to have it in our minds, our study placed 120 wildlife cameras across the upper Gunnison Basin to capture wildlife and outdoor recreation use of trails and areas nearby trails. Half of the cameras were placed on trail while the other half were placed off trail. On-trail sites were selected by using Colorado state lands or cooperating private landowners, which I represent here in the red boxes. Both paired cameras were placed in similar habitats in an attempt to limit variation of the two sites. Cameras were placed on a variety of trails from hiking only to OHV Jeep trails. Once the camera's SD card of photos was collected from the field, they were then uploaded into a customized database. To mitigate privacy issues, only 2 observers looked at the photos, and all photos with recreationists are deleted once the data was collected from them. We used the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Photo Warehouse. This database allowed us to customize it and classify photos one by one. Yes, I said one by one. Chloe and I spent a lot of time going through all of the photos to classify what was triggering the camera, whether it was an animal, a recreationist, or a pesky bush blowing in the wind. The database allowed us to customize the species list, which entailed entering in every species of animal we may have encountered, as well as our recreationist species, which I will explain in a moment. Once the database was set up properly, we were able to use the handy-dandy ID photo tools. This is the tool that allowed us to functionally collect our data from the photos. I'll dive into that in a few moments. So how did we classify recreation? Like I just mentioned, we had to set up a species list. Because we could create a list with anything in it, we were able to create recreation types as species. For example, hikers, mountain bikers, on-leash dogs, and off-leash dogs are all types of species that fall within the non-motorized category of recreation. On the other hand, we have dirt bikes, ATVs, side-by-sides, and vehicles are all examples of species that fall within the motorized category. These designations allowed us to separate the different types of recreation happening on each site. Now let's jump into the ID photo tool. This is a very user-friendly tool, and the classification can go fairly quickly once you're used to it. Here we have a photo of a recreationist and an off-leash dog. Below the photo, we can see a set of boxes that need filled out. The 3 important things here are listed as A, B, and C. The first needed information is what the species is. Let's take this dog, for example. The species should be an off-leash dog. The detail box next to it has an option for new party. The new party designation is only given to the first photo in which the recreationist appears, and any subsequent photos do not get the designation. This allowed us to later process the multiple photo incidents of recreation groups into a single incident. Lastly, the individual box is where the number of species could be entered. Let's look at this filled out. Here we have A and B in the photo corresponding with lines of data down below. Our first line represents the off-leash dog, while the second line represents the hiker. Every photo gets classified in the same way. The data table then reflects species at a photo level. So if we had a camera take a first photo of a hiker, and let's say that hiker has an off-leash dog, they both get the new party designation. Well, let's say the second photo only has the hiker in it. We want to make sure that when we analyze it, it doesn't read out as 2 hikers. This is where we use Studio R to analyze the new party designation. By having the designation on the first photo of new recreationists, we are able to split them into groups and better understand how many individuals are really in a given group. So in this orange example, rather than saying there are 2 counts of hikers and possibly confusing it as 2 hikers, the code in R helps us know that there's really just 1 hiker and 1 off-leash dog. Using R allowed us to slim down our data tables, and this is important so that we're not dealing with inflated counts of recreation. Chloe briefly showed some recreational results, and I wanted to reiterate those here. This graph shows the relationship of average motorized recreation for each day of the study duration across all motorized sites. We can see here that some days are averaging nearly 100 motorized recreationists. This next graph shows the relationship of non-motorized average number of recreationists for each day of the study across all of the non-motorized sites. Here we can see a day where the average number was over 150 recreationists. Recreation sees a lot of day-to-day variation, and this could cause wildlife to have a harder time coping with the inconsistent use and impacts. Now I want to move on to the behavior side of my project. I wanted to understand if animals were spending more time in vigilant behaviors in relation to recreation volume, distance to trail, and type of trail use. But first things first, what is vigilance? Vigilance is the act of being alert and aware of the surroundings. Animals are most often considered alert if they have their head up, high, and ears pointed in the direction they're looking. This entails a cost of time, meaning that the animal had to stop feeding to now be alert of its surroundings. Vigilance is an important aspect of animal life. It aids in the awareness of external danger, the awareness of environmental resources such as food, and is a method of communication among individuals. Most behavioral studies are performed in the field by real-time observation. My method used the same way of classifying behavior, but applied it to photos collected from wildlife cameras. I used the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Photo Warehouse for these classifications and created behaviors the same way we created recreationist species. These behaviors included fleeing, interacting, alert, walking, resting, and foraging. With everything classified, I was now equipped with my recreation data and the animal data. Recreation data had dates and times for each record, recreation volume, distance to trail metrics, trail use types, and various other habitat variables. The animal data also had dates and times, the species, the total number of animals, and counts of each behavior being displayed. I wanted to be able to test various aspects of behavior against various aspects of recreation, so that meant combining each of these into one big data table. With a little R magic on the side, I was able to summarize and combine information at a daily and study duration level. With these levels, I was now able to look deeper into vigilance behavior to try and predict what factors could be influencing animals. I wanted to know if animals spent more time in vigilant behaviors versus feeding behaviors in relation to recreation volume, distance to trail, and type of use on the trails. This graph shows the probability of vigilant behavior as the distance to trail increases. A distance of 0 were on-trail cameras. The probability of vigilant animals is how many of the animals out of the total counts were displaying vigilant behavior. This graph shows that there is a possible association with elk vigilance and its decrease as the distance from recreational trail increases. This next graph shows the probability of vigilance behavior as the total number of recreationists increases, depending on if it's a closer or farther from the trail site. Here we have 2 colored lines. Blue represents cases where camera sites were under 360 meters away from the trail, and red represents cases where the camera sites were over 360 meters away from the trail. The point of 360 meters is the mean number of distance for the distance to trail data. The graph suggests that there is an association between an increase in recreational volume and an increase in vigilant behavior of the distance to trail, or regardless of the distance to trail. However, vigilance behavior is more apparent at sites that are closer to the recreational trail compared to those at further distances. I've shared just a few of my preliminary results. I am still analyzing my data and will have more results later in the summer. I am very thankful for the people and resources that helped make this project possible. Without them, this project would not have been able to move forward. Thank you for being a part of this forum, and I'll see you back on Zoom for any questions.